Yeah, good to see everybody. Because of these stressful times that we're in, I mean, to be sure, even if one is in Australia, I'm sure you share some of our angst about what's going on in the world, and particularly because authoritarian kinds of issues and patriarchal issues, they're up everywhere. I mean, as people get fearful, they yearn for somebody who's going to come in and stomp their foot and do something. And it's fear driven. And it's out of ignorance and fear that people migrate these ways. But the outcomes can be very dire for all of us. And that's what we're dealing with. But we have the grace and the good fortune to be engaged in contemplation, teaching, study, practices that help us to have a much bigger picture. And because these are the dynamics that have played out in humanity forever. So this is not new. Humanity has gone through this. We survived this. We pushed through it. Gandhi, fighting the nightmares of the authoritarian rule of the British Empire. Famously quoting the Mahabharata or the Bhagavad Gita, chapter of the Mahabharata, of Lord Krishna, saying, where there's dharma, there's victory. We don't know the time frame for that victory. That's serious. But we know standing for dharma, and especially in this age, that's what we're called upon to do. Stand for dharma every way and everywhere we can. But in a yoga context, there's a wonderful story, again, out of the Hindu tradition, where there was this great enlightened king. His name was Janaka, King Janaka. And he was not just like an enlightened ruler who was good to his people, he was an enlightened being. God realized enlightened being. And which was a bit of a conundrum, especially for renunciates. Here are swamis and renunciates going, we gave up everything to pursue this state. Who's this guy, He's living in literally the lap of luxury. He's a ruler in, that time of India, very wealthy and taken care of, even though he's taking good care of his subjects. So one monk goes to the court of King Janaka one day because he wants to understand, how can this be? And who is this guy that's, seems, from the outside, it sounds like he's just wrapped up in a pleasure palace. What does he know about enlightenment? So this monk goes in, and Janaka, welcomed everybody into his court. And so into the court comes this young monk, and he looks at King Janaka, and he immediately gets it. Because there's King Janaka sitting, yes, in luxury, and one foot is a beautiful, one of his beautiful wives is massaging his one foot, and his other foot is literally in the brazier, in the fire, not being burned. And it was the immediate impact of the monk seeing that this is the state. Our state isn't dependent on is something pleasurable or painful in the world, in the body, even in the mind. The state of freedom is such a radical state of freedom. It's beyond imagining. That's where we go. When we talk about the unshakable equanimity, when Buddha talked about that as one of the four immeasurables, the boundless peace, unshakable equanimity, the boundless rapturous joy, the boundless compassion, the boundless wisdom. He wasn't talking about that those are caused by outer conditions. And by outer, we would say everything other than the infinite being of our true nature. So it's not dependent on the state of our mind. It's not dependent on the state of our surroundings. Our conditional happiness, our conditional comfort, our conditional peace, those are all parts of the ephemeral mind. And yes, we pursue being able to have the right conditions to optimize those. But the yogi says that's just to help, settle some of the ripples on the pond. That's not to get free of the pond. And so we're not just trying to be empowered to better manipulate the world and be more at ease because we're in a nice comfort zone. The radical freedom that sages and mystics have talked about forever, whether it was St. John of the Cross being beaten by fellow monks and persecuted by the church of which he was a part, or yogis, or sages, or saints, Sufis. So many examples of how great beings, even in the face of the terrible conditions, even being killed for being in that state. Wasn't this Jesus? So it helps us to be clear what we're looking at, going to, that it truly is beyond the mind. So that when we engage in the kinds of contemplations, the practices, being in the company of the sublime, the infinite, the one that is wearing all these different faces, that we truly understand, that's what we're in the company of. That which is beyond the conditions of the ordinary world, the ordinary mind, ordinary states of mind, ordinary emotional states. So Buddha would talk about, don't be attached to states of mind. It's not who you are. So even as we become more skillful at cultivating a steady state, the freedom that comes is from beyond that, which then ultimately sets the mind free. So that the mind can be in equanimity in the face of one foot in the pleasures of the world, one foot knowing simultaneously the fire of suffering of the world, King Janaka. So that's us. That's each and every one of us has that capacity. That's how expansive our true nature is. Embraces all pairs of opposites. Embraces and transcends. Transcends and includes. So just so that we have that understanding operating in the background, because even the ego mind, well motivated, our ego mind is saying, I want to practice, I want to come on, it's Sunday afternoon and not do something else. I'm going to renounce other things and be here. So it's making a right effort. We wanted to also be informed that the state of freedom that it can enjoy is available within and unshaken by whatever unfolds in the world. Unshaken by that. That doesn't mean unsympathetic. It doesn't mean lacking compassion or empathy. Those are qualities of mind that we cultivate. But the fullness of being. The ground of our being, the ground of our existence, unmoved by movements of the mind, unmoved by movements of the body, unmoved by movements of the world. That's what we come to know. So that wisdom, when Buddha was talking about the boundless wisdom, that what begins to infuse the mind and body with the steadiness they need. Because this mind-body vehicle lives in this world with all those pairs of opposites. If it's only informed by them, the leaf in the wind. So we want the ground of our being to be known as the root of our existence, and let that infuse the mind and body with the steadiness, the compassion, the wisdom, the love that arises from a boundless source, the ocean of the one. Fills your heart, the very nature of your being. So I just wanted to sort of invoke that understanding. It's inherent to each and every person, but so that we come back to that. You know, you see so much of sadhana, spiritual practice, is remembering. It's remembering. We were dismembered. We got separated from these truths that are our being. So to reunite with them is to remember. That's what undoes the dismembering that comes through ignorance, through that forgetting.